Have you ever wondered why human beings are just fundamentally flawed, right? Well, today we're decoding this massive, complex theological taxonomy of original sin, and we're basing this explainer on a really fascinating lecture by Dr. Robert A. Peterson. It's essentially a deep dive into the philosophical architecture of human nature, guilt, and ultimately salvation. Okay, to get our heads around this, let's dive into a pretty visceral metaphor from the source material. Imagine a guy drowned in the rushing rapids of the Niagara River. He's tumbling in the current, heading straight for the falls, and if he goes over, well, he's an absolute goner. Now, picture God standing on the riverbank offering to help. How this exact rescue plays out actually frames the entire theological debate we're about to unpack. Here is our roadmap through these deep theological waters. We're going to cover 1. The drowning man metaphor. 2. Defining original sin. 3. The Calvinist split. 4. The problem of alien guilt. And 5. The mechanisms of imputation.
All right, Section 1. The drowning man metaphor. 4 responses to a deadly current. Let's see how 19th century evangelist Charles Finney broke down the major views using our scenario.
So this brilliantly maps out the landscape. On one extreme, you have the Pelagians. They say the man in the water isn't actually helpless. He has the full ability to just, swim out entirely on his own. On the complete opposite side, the Augustinians argued the man is completely unconscious, so God has to dive in, pull him out, and resuscitate him with zero help from the guy. And then we have the middle ground. The semi-Pelagians say, okay, the man is in trouble, but he has to make the first move by calling out for a rescue. Meanwhile, the semi-Augustinians argue the reverse, that God calls out from the beach first, but the man must actively respond to actually be saved.
To fully grasp these rescue scenarios, the speaker notes we need to nail down 2 critical terms here: monergism and synergism. Pelagianism and Augustinianism are both monergistic. That basically means action by one party. Either humanity completely saves itself, or God alone saves the unconscious man. The semi-positions? Those are synergism, meaning God and humanity are working together in some capacity to get it done.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining original sin. What exactly is inherited? Beyond the rushing river metaphor, we have to look at the root of the problem. When we talk about the fall of humanity across these different historical camps, what exactly gets passed down to us?
Now, what's really interesting here is how Dr. Peterson's lecture delineates the absolute boundaries of what gets inherited. The Pelagians, they argue we're born as total blank slates. We inherit absolutely nothing from Adam. No guilt, no corruption. Basically, we're all our own Adam. Arminians take it a step further. They say, sure, we inherit a corrupt nature, but not the legal guilt of Adam's sin. And finally, the Calvinists argue that both a corrupted nature and legal guilt hit our spiritual bank accounts before we take our very first breath.
But the source is quick to point out a major critique of the Pelagian view. Think about it. If we're born as blank slates, then Adam was merely setting a bad example. Peterson notes this directly conflicts with the Apostle Paul's writings in Romans 5, which repeatedly hammers home that the one sin of one man caused the downfall of all. Plus, Pelagianism completely fails to explain why death reigned over people from Adam to Moses who hadn't consciously committed individual transgressions the way Adam did. The math just doesn't add up.
This leads us to Section 3, the Calvinist split. How are we connected to Adam? Let's zoom strictly into the Calvinist camp for a minute, because while they agree on the inheritance of guilt and corruption, they fiercely debate the actual mechanics of the connection.
We get 2 distinct subpositions here. First is federal headship, also known as the representative view. This posits that Adam was basically our legal proxy. God placed the entire human race on probation in the person of this first man. When he failed, boom, his guilt was imputed to us. On the flip side is natural headship, or realism. This takes a wildly more physical approach, arguing humanity was biologically, genetically present in Adam from the very beginning.
This quote from theologian Millard Erickson really vividly captures that realist perspective. He writes that we were present in germinal or seed form in our ancestors. Meaning, in this view, the entire human race sinned as a collective whole because we were literally inside Adam. So for a realist, inheriting a corrupted nature isn't unfair at all. It's just a logical result of something we collectively participated in.
Okay, on to Section 4, the problem of alien guilt, the philosophical boss fight. This brings us to the ultimate puzzle of this whole explainer, and the deeply controversial concept that causes so much friction. The crucial point to grasp here is alien guilt. It's being held legally and morally accountable for a sin committed by an external representative long before you even existed.
The speaker in our source material notes that the absolute biggest complaint against that federal headship view is how incredibly unfair it feels. People are like, come on, Adam made me do it? Why should the entire human race be condemned for the sin of one guy in a garden thousands of years ago?
It's a fair question, but the lecture points out a striking, almost poetic biblical parallel in Romans 5 that justifies this entire framework. It notes that just as believers are saved by an alien righteousness from Christ, meaning a righteousness entirely outside of themselves that they didn't earn, they are similarly condemned by an alien guilt from Adam. So the nature of that representative union is totally parallel on both sides of the equation, condemned by one, saved by another.
Now, what about those who prefer the realism view to escape that feeling of unfairness? Well, referencing the source text here, theologian S. Lewis Johnson severely critiques the logic of realism. He points out what he calls intolerable implications. Think about it. If generic humanity physically sinned while inside Adam, why are we only responsible for his first sin? Why aren't we legally guilty of literally every single sin Adam committed afterward? And for that matter, why isn't Eve's sin counted against the human race?
Johnson actually drives this home with a great point, saying realism could say this, but Paul never says it, and the silence is almost deafening. The crucial takeaway here is that the biblical text repeatedly and specifically ties our guilt back to the one distinct act of one man acting as a representative. It never attributes our guilt to some collective act of a generic humanity present in seed form.
All right, final section, Section 5, Mechanisms of Imputation, the causal order of inheritance. Finally, Dr. Peterson's lecture unpacks an even more granular debate within Calvinism about the exact chronological order of how this sin hits our spiritual accounts.
Let's look at the traditional view, immediate imputation. The causal order here is very straightforward. Step 1, Adam sins. Step 2, the legal guilt of that sin is immediately imputed or credited to the human race. And step 3, a corrupt human nature follows as a direct resulting punishment of that assigned guilt. So guilt comes first, corruption follows.
Conversely, we have a scholar named Joshua Placius who proposed mediate imputation. Placius basically reversed the order, mainly to try and soften the uncomfortable blow of that alien guilt we talked about. In his sequence, Adam sins, we immediately inherit a corrupt nature as a result, and then, step 3, we are deemed legally guilty only because we actively participate in that inherited corrupted nature.
It sounds a bit more palatable, right? Yet, as the lecture text argues, mediated imputation faces a fatal logical flaw. The argument goes like this. Inherent depravity and corruption are universally agreed to be a punishment for Adam's sin. But if a corrupt nature is a legal punishment, well then legal guilt absolutely must have preceded it. You literally cannot justly punish humanity with a corrupt nature if they haven't first been deemed legally guilty. Therefore, mediated imputation logically just collapses right back into acquiring immediate Adam guilt.
Looking back at the ground we've covered, we can clearly see this intense historical and theological quest for logical coherence. I mean, we've gone from the rushing waters of monergism and synergism to defining the exact inheritance of guilt and corruption. We've mapped our connection to the source, whether as a legal representative or a physical root. And finally, we broke down the precise mechanics of immediate versus mediate imputation. It's like a giant, fascinating puzzle. So we'll leave you with this thought to ponder from today's explainer. In a modern society that constantly preaches radical independence, being the master of your own fate, how does this ancient, intricately mapped concept of representative guilt and representative rescue challenge our modern view of the self? Are we truly as isolated as we think we are, or are our destinies inherently tied to those who represent us? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.